Thank you very much for having me today. Greetings from Brussels. So my name is Wiebke Pankauke. I'm Deputy Head of Unit for Future Urban and Mobility Systems in the European Commission's Department for Research and Innovation. As announced, I'm going to speak a bit more about the EU mission on climate neutral and smart cities. I'm afraid I had connection problems earlier, so I wasn't able to hear really, unfortunately, what Minister Gewessler said. Would have really liked to, but I hope I won't repeat too much and hopefully give you a bit more additional information. Just briefly about myself, I joined the mission team earlier this year, and I have the feeling that there are many people, both amongst the speakers and amongst the audience, who are very knowledgeable on the topic already and probably know more about the history of the mission than I do. But I do my best to give you hopefully some news and hopefully also some thoughts that could be helpful for the discussion of this conference. I would have loved to be there in person, not only because you are in beautiful Vienna, but also to have a chance to speak to some of you, and because I know there's already a lot of work going on, both in Austria and elsewhere across the EU, that we're very excited about. I think Minister Gewessler probably already mentioned the preparatory work that's going on and the support that is already happening in Austria, which is really great for us to see. And I know, of course, as well, that the expectations for us in the Commission are now very big. So we are very aware of that. So I would like to share my screen now. Yes. So now I hope all is set up correctly. Let me start from the beginning very briefly. What are EU missions? I'm sure many of you know, but just to recall. So how we conceive EU missions is really as a new way of tackling some major societal challenges that we are facing in the EU and worldwide, really. So we have identified 5 mission areas. On cancer is one of them, one on soil and food health, one on climate adaptation, oceans and seas, and of course, last but not least, climate neutral and smart cities that we're talking about today. So what is so different about these missions? We want to have a new approach to these problems, starting from an endpoint, fixing really a specific and measurable endpoint that we want to get to, and then thinking backwards, what do we need to do to get there? And what do we need to do, but also how do we enable others to get there? How do we link up strands of work that are already happening? And how do we go across boundaries of the existing programs and existing sectors to really focus specifically on getting to a defined target? For that, there has already been a lot of preparatory work that some of you may have been involved in. So for each of the mission areas, we have appointed mission boards who are experts in the field and quite high-ranking personalities. And all of these mission boards presented reports with recommendations. That was in autumn of last year. And on the basis of that, we were asked then in the Commission to come up with implementation plans. So taking the recommendations of the boards and transforming them into concrete plans, concrete ideas. How are we going to work with these ideas in practice? Why a mission on climate neutral cities? So I think the situation is pretty obvious, but just to give you a few figures about what the situation in cities across the EU looks like. So cities only have about 4% of land mass in Europe, but are home to 75% of EU citizens. And this is actually projected to increase quite a lot in future. Cities consume most of the energy and also generate most of CO2 emissions worldwide. And we also have figures that about 85% of EU urban population are actually right now exposed to particulate matter that is dangerous for their health. And we have other effects in urban areas. Congestion continues to grow. Time losses from traffic congestion cost us a lot as a society. So all of these things show you there is a lot to do at city level, and we need the cities to really be at the center and at the forefront of our efforts. When we think of the targets that the EU has set itself for the European Green Deal. So that is lowering emissions by 55% by 2030, and then becoming the first climate neutral continent by 2050. There is really no way that we can do that without the cities. And we like to say that cities is actually where policy meets people, where these changes have to happen and where the changes will be felt as well, the positive developments, of course. And we're not starting from scratch. There are already there's a lot of ongoing work, fantastic work in many European cities. 150 EU cities are already working towards climate neutrality. Some of them with very ambitious plans. But so far, we only have a handful of cities who are working with a 2030 timeline. And we have met a lot of city representatives and talked to experts as well, of course. And we have asked, so what is keeping them from setting such a 2030 timeline? And barriers that we often hear about is, of course, a lack of administrative capacity, staff simply often, technical knowledge partly, but most often what comes up is regulatory barriers. And of course, it is a costly business, funding and financing. Also still on the situation that we're finding ourselves in at the moment. So there is a big field, quite a crowded field, as it looks like on this graphic, of existing initiatives. And this only gives you an overview of the most important European initiatives. There are then also, of course, initiatives at national level, at regional level, and also at global level. So there is quite a crowded field already of really some very, very great projects and programs. Our idea is not to replace any of those. Some of you may be involved in at least one or two of those, but our idea is not to get rid of them, but to try and find links between them and to try and really use the impact of these programs towards the goal of climate neutrality. The objectives of the mission, I'm sure, have already been mentioned. So very clear, very specific, measurable. The first objective is we want to deliver at least 100 climate neutral and smart European cities by 2030. And secondly, we don't want to stop there, but we want to use these cities as experimentation and innovation hubs to then enable all European cities to follow suit by 2050, which is where the whole continent needs to be by that stage. And I think what you can see underneath these two objectives is something that I think is really something where we think that speaks to people. Of course, climate neutrality as such is not something that you can feel, but the really huge co-benefits that could be shown by this, where policy meets people, so in cities, is better air quality, less road congestion, more livable spaces. So these co-benefits is really, I think, what matters to people, and that we hope will then also bring this mission to life. How would we like to go about it? So now this is all explained at great detail in our implementation plan. I can already say that we have now, after the implementation plan that has been done, there's agreement that we can go ahead with the launch of all of the 5 missions. And we're preparing an official launch, which should be in about 2 to 3 weeks. So I can't give you all the final output of what we're going to announce, but I can give you a sneak preview of what is in the implementation plan. And we're also going to publish then the implementation plan at the time of the launch of the missions. So then you will be able to see for yourself how exactly we envisage this to happen. So our idea is to have what we call a joined up approach to urban climate action. So the idea is, as is typical of the mission concept, to have a demand-driven, so meaning that demand-driven process. So meaning we start from what is needed, what do cities need to get where they need to be, and an innovative process that we want to embed firmly in research and innovation, because the missions are part of the Horizon Europe research program. So we want to see systemic change in really cross-cutting R&I actions. But we don't want to stop there. We want to involve all the different levels of government, linking up local, regional, national, and EU. We want to support access to funding and finance. I'll say more about that in a minute. And we also want, which is also very important for the mission concept as such, we want to have citizens involved at all stages of the design and also of the implementation of the mission. Now here you can see the main elements of the mission in green, really the focal elements that I focus most on. So the central element that we have in mind are the device called climate city contracts. I'll explain more what that means in a minute. And we'll have a mission platform that will support delivery of what we have in mind. And then you'll see other elements that surround it. And of course, in the center of all efforts, R&I action as really the foundation, the basis of this mission. So the way we conceive it is that there should be a mission platform where all the strands of work of the mission come together. So this mission platform should be a one-stop shop for cities. It should give cities assistance in co-creating climate city contracts together with citizens, with local stakeholders, and with all the authorities who are involved. It should also give cities help with investment plans, really, again, tailor-made to their needs, with project preparation, very concretely, and also with financial advice. And then we want this mission platform also to launch R&I pilots and demonstrators. So to launch calls for proposal for large-scale pilots that could be done by lead cities that then twin with and also mentor other cities. As you remember, the second objective of the mission is to have experimentation hubs in these cities to then be able to inspire and inform other cities who have a longer timeline, maybe not as far, not as advanced, and who will then also be able to benefit from these demonstrators and learn from them. Now, climate city contracts. The idea is that each city who participates in the mission should come up with a plan how they intend to reach climate neutrality by 2030. Again, of course, adapted to their individual needs. So we're not prescribing the way to get there, but we want to see some plausible, realistic plans, as I said, supported by this mission platform, and then co-created with the involvement of all authorities, and also local stakeholders, citizens, and also local economic actors. The climate city contracts should also show something innovative, so innovative city governance, an investment plan, and of course also arrangements for monitoring and reporting. So now the idea is that these, we call them contracts, but they should not be legally binding, but they should be a very visible commitment signed by the mayor or by the city's representatives, and witnessed by the Commission. And we would like it to be a commitment that is of course to the Commission, but not only to the Commission, but also to the authorities and also to the citizens, so that it should be a very transparent process showing what the plans are and how the intention is to get there. These climate city contracts should then give access to a mission label. So such a mission label would recognize the quality and the feasibility of these climate action commitments, and should allow the EU, regions, member states to support actions in cities that have such a label, so participating cities in the mission. And we hope that this weight of this label would also really boost awareness of investors and also confidence in investment projects in that city. I've mentioned the R&I content, really central to the way we've devised the mission. So the mission platform on the one hand should launch R&I pilots as demonstrators. And then there will also be other R&I activities for cities and communities, which will be part of the, so to speak, the usual Horizon Europe work program. And some of them you might, for those who are very well informed, you might already have seen that there are some calls, already some preparatory calls out now, and we're preparing a first full work program for the end of the year, where you will then also see a number of topics that we hope will have really major impact on cities, for example, in the areas of transport and energy. The goals, of course, with R&I here is develop capacity in the cities who have those projects, but also to then showcase the possibilities to scale up some solutions and to replicate them elsewhere. Citizen engagement is key. And this is also something that we will look at also horizontally across the different missions to also see what kind of formats work, what cities and maybe also for other missions, other parts were involved, what experience they're gathering with involving citizens. And the mission platform should really gather all that up and should digest it and then recommend and advise cities in which kind of form of citizen engagement might work for them. And important for us is really that we involve citizens in their different roles as political agents, as voters, also as users, as producers, also as investors in their local areas, as consumers, and of course also as visitors or tourists. And the idea is that citizens should be included in the local governance models. Funding and financing, as I said, this really comes up a lot when we talk to cities, obviously, because it's very clear that the funds we can make available at EU level will be far from sufficient to go anywhere near climate neutrality. We're very aware of that. But we'll do what we can with providing funding support from the different programs that already exist. So not only Horizon Europe, but also other programs that are interesting for cities. And we hope there as well to really make use of the mission label. We've already started a very good cooperation with the European Investment Bank, who is also very much focusing now on being a climate bank. And also we would like to expand that to national promotional institutions. And there we're looking at particularly at financial advisory, but we're also talking to the colleagues in the European Investment Bank about a possible lending facility to also get other financial instruments involved. And we believe that it's important to have private investors on board. So individual, private companies, commercial banks. And there, I would recommend that it's very interesting to have a look at the new EU Sustainable Finance Agenda, because that really offers some new opportunities to encourage investors to invest locally. This is also a recent initiative of the Commission. And this really talks about things like green bonds and de-risking at local level. So the hope is that we would find ways of having investors interested in investing in their own local neighborhood to really see the results of their investment and to be able to showcase that also with a mission label that it then shows how the mission acts in people's everyday lives. We also see a global dimension for the mission. Of course, we don't want to stop at the EU's borders and not take into account what is happening elsewhere. We want to coordinate our interactions with other international organizations and networks of cities. Of course, there are global initiatives that are also very far advanced in reflections on reaching climate neutrality at urban level. So the idea is to have an exchange center that would facilitate the flow of knowledge in both ways, in and out, and to promote the best solutions that we have found and that have been found elsewhere in the world, again, for replication, scaling up in line with the mission's objectives. So this would also then allow for the setup of some joint activities that would deepen cooperation with, especially with our strategically important partners. But for us, this is maybe a bit of a medium-term plan. So we are thinking about establishing this in about 2023, not for straight away. But what is coming up straight away is, or rather relatively soon, let's say, is a call for expression of interest that we plan to launch. So this is really back to the core of where we want to go with a mission inside the EU. I've mentioned that we're planning to officially launch all 5 missions soon, in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then the next step for the cities mission will be a call for expression of interest that we plan still to launch before the end of the year, hopefully in autumn. And that should then encourage cities to express their interest to be participants in the mission. We will publish an info kit for cities that will really explain all the conditions and what we are requesting as information at that stage. It is not a commitment at that stage, it's an expression of interest. And it also will, of course, explain what kind of cities can apply and what this will then mean for them. So we have said that we would focus on entities of more than 50,000 inhabitants. We would particularly encourage large cities simply because they would make a big difference in terms of emission reductions. But we're not stopping there. We also want a good balance of small and big cities. And we would also like to encourage cities that are maybe not as far advanced in their climate neutrality plans to come forward to express their interest, because especially some cities, say in Eastern and Southern Europe, are maybe not as far advanced, but would make a huge difference in emission reductions if they came on board to the mission, either already with a very ambitious deadline, or also with maybe a timeline that ends a bit later. That is always still possible. Our assessment criteria, this is also still to be published and to be explained in a lot of detail in the information, in the info kit that we're preparing. So essentially, we'd be focusing on the city's level of preparedness, ambition, the existing and planned commitments to climate neutrality, and of course also the commitment to involve citizens and stakeholders. That is the general outline, but it will become much clearer then once we have the info kit published. And lastly, just a quick overview of it's not really complete, I have to say, of the next steps. So we're planning to first launch the missions, then launch the call for expression of interest. Then in the course of 2022, we will have the first research and innovation actions concluding their contracts, and then development of climate city contracts, and then later on, hopefully starting in 2023, but to be seen, the deployment of the first climate city contracts. So I will end here. I hope I have given you some interesting and possibly useful information. I can only end by saying that we hope for many applications. We also always ready to answer to questions that cities may have. We are of course aware that there is a lot of things that cities are now eager to learn about. So we're available. We're also thinking about organizing some info sessions or events to be seen, really to allow cities to understand what we have in mind. And yes, I can only say you will see more in about 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wiebke. I think you will not stay online with us for 2 hours, so I would suggest if there are any questions, we should ask them now. And as life is not always fair, I would say we have 1 micro here, and he can only walk up with 1 micro. So first questions from this side, and the other side has to wait if there are questions from here. Any questions? Any direct questions? Yeah. Can you please introduce yourself shortly and say
Sure.
who you are?
Hi, Manfred.
Hi.
Frank Dont, Secretary General.
I know you.
ISOCARP, yes. Yes, thank you for the presentation. I am from Belgium, where I see your program having good results. But I live in Athens, in Greece, where I don't see it happen if you don't do an extra, effort to reach out directly to the citizens, because in countries like Greece, there is a big gap between the political level and the citizen engagement. So it is very likely that if there is money around, the government will somehow apply and do something, but to really do it with citizen engagement, we'll need some additional incentives or criteria to make sure it's real and not fake. Thank you.
Wiebke, will you answer immediately, or will you wait?
I can answer immediately if you like. Yes, thank you very much for the question. And of course, that is also something that has come up a lot in conversations with cities. So how do we involve the different levels? How do we involve the national level, the regional level, and how do we make sure that cities also have the room of maneuver that's necessary to take part in the mission? So we, of course, this is a very important political initiative of the Commission as well. So we will be talking, and we are talking already, to member state representatives. There will be national contact points in each country. That is really whose responsibility will be to facilitate that sort of exchange, to also to point us to any barriers, to help us identify what the national level could do or is willing to do, and what cities need. So these links will be established and will be very important. We also hope for the, or we expect for the mission platform to have a big impact there, when you can really see from the experience of some countries what has worked. And then we really believe that once you have convincing examples of cities and of course then their countries, their supportive countries, that this will really inspire also other countries and their cities to come forward and to enable the process to start.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We all believe in a better future, I think. It will be.
Indeed.